Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mondoid, your one-stop shop for all things Project Zomboid. And this week, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for taking a tremendously short break from Grand Theft Auto 5, as it is the Monday of the launch, or Tuesday now, rather, of the launch of Grand Theft Auto 5, and I know I'll be playing it by the time you're watching it, hopefully, so long as I'm not working. So thank you for taking a break to come see this pretty face. Anyway, this week we've got a lot to go over, and by a lot, I mean not much at all. That's right, I tricked you. I'm full of jokes. Basically, your typical updated Mondoid. There's not much to talk about, which is not necessarily a bad thing, as it just means they're still working on it, but a few notable things to probably discuss just a little bit to estimate potentially how close we are to seeing that early access release that I have been drooling for since a year ago. So let's swing on down. It's called Bug Battering, and there's the first thing they want to talk about is that the Steam beta version is getting pretty stable. They're working on getting it stable because once the beta version that's on Steam is stable, they can move that over to Desura, so they can have a Desura stable version. They don't want to update the Desura version that's going to break things. Those who have the Steam version, though, are prone to potentially losing progress or having things broken. So they don't want that to happen on Desura, but they're okay with it happening on Steam for now. And that's fine because you opt into the beta when you take the Project Zomboid. There's actually a little check mark thing, whatever it is. So that's just how that is. One of the biggest bugs that has been fixed, as they're proud to announce, is the invisible wall bug. The invisible wall bug has plagued me a couple of times. I'm sure it's hit a lot of people more often than it's hit me. It's basically you're playing and you're walking, and then all of a sudden you can't move past a certain point, and it's this straight line of wall that you can't get by, and the only way I've ever been able to get around it is just restarting the game. It's not a huge inconvenience, but one that would impede progress and kind of slow down your play, and obviously they don't want that to happen, so that has been squashed, supposedly, which is always a good thing. Really happy to hear that. Other things have been, they said once they get all the other bugs or other things cleaned up, they can then focus on the Kate and Baldspot tutorial / story, which is, I think, the last check mark that they want to finish before they put it up on early access. I'm hoping they get it up before November. I really want to see this thing up before November. As November rolls around, there's going to be so many things on Steam that I don't want to see Project Zomboid get buried under all of that. I would love to see a little bit before Halloween, a Halloween release date. I think this kind of game would sell really well during the Halloween month, all of October. The earlier in October, the better, in my opinion. It's just a good month for a zombie game, I feel like. And again, as we come closer to November, the more crazy things we're going to see on Steam. And then the Steam Holiday Sale comes around, and I don't know how you get on the Steam Holiday Sale, but seeing Zomboid on that, I'd say probably not, just because they're going to be kind of new. But my hopes is to see this thing in October. I think it'd be a good push for it in October. Scary games, zombie games, supernatural stuff in general, as far as the entertainment industry is concerned, tend to do really well in October, I think. So I'm hoping it would be good, especially during October. You kind of have that video game drought, and to see Zomboid up on there would be kind of a very good, I think, marketing idea. I don't have any knowledge in marketing at all. I'm just kind of taking a stab at it. So other than that, let's see. They've also announced that Romain now had his first full day of Project Zomboid working. He's no longer at his old day job. He is a full-time Indie Stone employee as of today. So any bugs you have that you report on the forum, he will be getting to them as soon as possible. Other bugs that they're working on is the black square line of sight. I've actually had that happen in a video once or twice. Basically what the black square line of sight is, as far as I can tell, is as you're walking, the world kind of loads in these square, like, grid fashion, like, slowly, and it's this weird situation that I don't know what caused it. It almost looks like the game is lagging in some way, but it's not, because I'm running it at, like, 60 frames a second or close to that, so I'm curious to see why that happens. And one other bug that other people have talked about that I haven't ever experienced, but I know I've seen people talk about it in the forums, is that zombies tend to appear where they shouldn't be, and they are working on getting that fixed immediately, because that could end a run. If you're load up into your world, you're in your safe house, you turn around, and there's a zombie right behind you when your safe house is 100% clear, or at least was, that could end a run. So I'm glad to hear that they're working on that one, because that is incredibly important to fix. We're also working on optimizing, which is still getting it to run really well, even on low-end machines. Again, this is a game that, though graphically isn't very intensive, it does require and will require a lot of processing power. I know I constantly go back to the comparison to Crusader Kings 2 or Paradox games. Those games are not graphically intensive, but they strain a processor, especially if your processor isn't that good, because they're constantly running numbers behind the scenes. And once NPCs are introduced and the metagame is fully introduced, you can expect Project Zomboid to be even more taxing on a processor than it already is. So if you're already having issues, optimization is something they've been really working on. I think a game like this that's going to be running a lot of behind-the-scenes numbers, because it's going to be more of an RPG simulation than a survival horror game, which is something that I've been reading a lot about, is going to be necessary. So I'm glad to see that they're optimizing. And last but not least, the reason to go check out the blog, in my opinion, this week is the pictures of some West Point. There's a lot of stuff they're bringing into West Point. West Point looks like it's coming close to hopefully being finished. You look like you got the town hall, you got some new shops, you got a pie shop, all kind of cool pictures to check out. It's good to see what kind of things we can potentially hole up in that I'm excited to potentially run to and make a new Survivor safe house for when this does hit. And I'm excited to see it. And this is kind of a weird off-topic that I wanted to talk a little bit about. And I saw it in where did I see it? I can't remember where I saw it. I was reading an article, not an article, a discussion about this game somewhere. And I read this last week somewhere. And I remember them talking about, Project Zomboid is not scary. It's not a scary survival horror game. And I remember thinking, where do people think, this is, again, I'm going off on a tangent, so prepare yourself. Where are people figuring out or thinking this is a survival horror game? It's funny because Project Zomboid is such a unique idea. Games like 7 Days to Die are survival horror because of the kind of first-person view you're in, but it's not a survival horror game in my opinion. It's just not what it is. And other games like this that are use zombies as a backdrop for a different type of game, I don't see a survival horror. Just because a game has survival horror or has zombies or any sort of undead in it doesn't automatically make it survival horror. And I remember thinking this is so frustrating because there are, I realized, a certain contingent of people who have decidedly noted that any game that has zombies in it should be survival horror, and if it's not scary, it's not for them. And it made me realize that these people need to be educated in what this game is for, and it's interesting that they have to be. What Project Zomboid is more of an RPG simulation, much like 7 Days to Die is more of a survival crafting game. And there is, Zomboid is a survival simulation game with RPG elements, I guess. And it's about the emerging story. It's not about the horrors, the scares, the jump scares. Sure, there are every once in a while where I'll kind of jump because the audio cue kind of makes you jump, but it's not a scary game. The game is about simulating what life would be if this particular fantasy or this particular fantasy setting or, supernatural setting were to actually take place. And it's about living and having the story that can be told in this kind of world to come to life before your eyes. It's not about being scared. And I just remember talking, and I think eventually he kind of got the point. And that's why, that's what makes Project Zomboid so special to me. And I mean, I remember looking back, and the reason I started thinking about this is because the last blog, or the blog before that, I remember talking, I would love to see Zomboid get out there because there are more and more games coming out like Zomboid. But what makes Zomboid special and why I like it so much is because it doesn't, like State of Decay, for example, which is one of the examples I used. It is very similar to Project Zomboid. Oh, there's a hiccup. I apologize. Like Project Zomboid, State of Decay is very much about the survival aspect with a little bit of simulation, but it's more of a survival action game with simulation and RPG elements, where Project Zomboid is so heavily a simulation game with RPG elements, especially when the metagame comes into play and the NPCs eventually come into play. That's what this game is aiming to be. And I've, come to this realization over time, especially when Lemmy, started talking, or Chris for his real name, Lemmy on Twitter, started talking about Crusader Kings 2 and his love for the genre. And then, after I played it and got into it and really fell in love with that, I started to see very plainly a lot of Zomboid's inspirations, a lot of where it gets its ideas. And I urge you guys, if you like RPGs, or if you like simulation strategy games, play Crusader Kings 2. It is incredibly cheap to get a hold of and get into now. It's only like $20, I think, for the base game. I think it might be 40 still. Double check on that. It's on Steam. But you could see where Zomboid gets a lot of its play ideas, a lot of its NPC ideas, more particularly as its very different games in general. But that's what the game's about. It's about the lives of those who live in this particular world, much like Crusader Kings 2 is kind of about the lives of the people who lived in medieval Europe at the time. And I'm curious, drop it in the comments below. Did you see this game when you started to play it as a survival horror experience and then learn over time what it actually was and love it more? Did you know what it was going in? Or did you go into it expecting this? Because I went into this game initially thinking it was going to be like a survival horror survival experience, or a survival horror experience with emphasis on survival, and then over time learning what this game actually was, which is kind of funny that it took so long. But it's interesting to me that there are people out there who think that that's exactly what this game is, when it's very much not a survival horror experience. It's something so much more than that, in my opinion. So check it out. Crusader Kings 2. If you don't know anything about Crusader Kings 2, trust me, Project Zomboid draws a good chunk of inspiration from that game, and for good reason, especially when it comes to NPCs. But I'm going to wrap up my rant. Very random, kind of off tangent, but I was just thinking about it a lot, and I wanted to talk about it. If you guys are one of those once-a-weekers, make sure you come back next week for more Mondoid. If you're a regular, I'll see you later today. And as always, I'll see you next time.